I started from the depot in McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, New Jersey, an army complex I'd never been cleared to enter before. The paperwork was thin, and the guards' eyes were thicker than any fog. They didn't tell me what was inside the trailer, just that it was sensitive material. I signed a confidential transport agreement and was escorted to my rig like I was being handed the codes to a warhead. Inside the trailer, I heard nothing. No shifting boxes, no weight roll when I hit the ramp. Whatever it was, it sat dead still. The trailer was sealed with a heavy steel lock stamped with a federal emblem I didn't recognize, an eagle missing its stars. The instructions were simple. Haul east toward Toms River, then hook south to a temporary research facility near Hamilton. But by the time I hit Route 70, a glowing LED divider outside Lakehurst announced that a tanker wreck had closed the main road. I took the Dieter through the pines, figuring 40 extra miles was better than sitting in gridlock. If you've never driven through the New Jersey Pine Barrens, imagine miles upon miles of pitch pines and sandy soil, the road winding between endless undergrowth. The GPS loses signal, and radio stations fade into static. The smell changes too, sharp, resinous, like the trees are breathing near your ear. I passed a sign for Ong's Hat, a ghost town I'd only heard mentioned in truck stop folklore, and saw nothing but darkness beyond the treeline. By then the weight behind me had started to hum, just lightly at first, like a refrigerator kicking on. I checked my mirrors, thinking maybe it was a shifting generator or something. But the sound wasn't mechanical. It had a pulse to it. 10 miles later, the pulsing turned into vibration. My hood ornament rattled. Every bolt in the steering column seemed to join in like a tuning fork. I slowed the Kenworth to 30, got out near a turnout, and cut the engine. Silence hit me so hard it rang in my ears. A low, drawn-out sound seeped from the metal walls, like something breathing through water. I could feel it against my boots, deep in the dirt. I circled the truck, flashlight in hand, beam bouncing off white sand and pine bark. When I passed near the trailer doors, the padlock quivered, literally moved, like something inside was pressing gently against it. A minute later, a shape flashed between the trees. Not an animal I recognized. The wingspan was huge, maybe 12 feet, and leathery. It glided low, skimmed the road once, and vanished over the treeline with a scream that didn't belong to any bird. At first, I thought fatigue was catching up. Long miles and empty roads can play tricks, but when I got back in the cab, the CB crackled to life. A garbled voice came through on Channel 19. "Driver, you in the pines right now?" I grabbed the mic, heart pounding. "Yeah. Who's this?" "You need to keep moving," the voice said. "Don't pull over again, you understand me?" Before I could answer, the radio went dead. At the same instant, my headlights dimmed and flared. Something slammed onto the top of the trailer, heavy, the weight rocking the truck. The sound of claws scraping metal cut through the night like a saw. Branches blurred past as I tore down that Tulane, praying no deer decided to end both of us. The creature stayed above me, its shadow passing across the windshield every few seconds. The hum from the trailer rose into a low, electrical moan. I caught sight of motion again when I hit a clearing near Batstow Village, an old iron town turned historical site. There are no lights there after midnight, just the outline of buildings against the stars. I pulled to the shoulder and saw the thing land 30 yards behind me. It stood on the road, framed by my taillights. Goat-like legs, wings wider than the truck, its head elongated, horse-like, with burning red eyes. The Jersey Devil, I realized. The story every trucker swapped half-jokingly at the Petro diner. Except it didn't look angry. It looked drawn to something. It hunched near the trailer, sniffing, clawing at the doors. Whatever was inside, whatever those soldiers loaded, called to it like blood calls to a shark. The lock snapped, a clean metallic pop, and the devil reeled back, shrieking. A brilliant light poured from the gap in the doors, spilling across the pine sand like molten silver. The thing screamed again, wings flailing, and vanished into the treeline with a crash that sent pine needles raining down. For a long minute, I sat there shaking, staring at the tailgate. If I called dispatch, I'd be detained, maybe worse. So I did the only thing that kept me alive on the road. I put the truck in gear and drove until the sun came up. At dawn, when I finally reached the handoff site near Hamilton, men in gray uniforms were waiting. No insignia, no badges. One of them pointed at my cab window. "Step out." They inspected the trailer quietly. One man climbed inside and didn't come back out for 5 minutes. When he did, his face was pale as bleached sand. "You didn't open it?" he asked. "No, sir." "Anyone approach the vehicle?" I hesitated. Something did. He stared at me. You didn't see anyone, right? I said. No one. He nodded to the others. They resealed the doors with another lock, different insignia this time, and handed me a manila envelope marked bonus delivery. Before I could ask what it was, they dismissed me. I opened the envelope later at a roadside diner. Inside was cash and a single photo, black and white, grainy. A creature crouched beside some kind of containment tank. The eyes glowed red, even through the old film. That night, I took a different route home, avoiding the pines completely. But every vibration, every bump of the road since then, still makes my heart leap. Somewhere under the hum of the engine, I swear I can still hear that thing breathing, like it's trying to remember the sound of my name. I'd been through Louisiana a dozen times before and always said the same thing. Something about that air feels alive. It clings to you differently out here, heavier somehow, like it's listening. You don't just drive through Louisiana. You pass through something unseen. I never believed all that hoodoo talk until last spring, hauling a flatbed down Route 190 at 2 in the morning. I was hauling a generator to Lake Charles from Baton Rouge, taking the back route through Opelousas and Port Barre to avoid the interstate. The bayou heat was pushing through the night, thick as oil. Every now and then, fog rose from the ditch lines, rolling across the asphalt in slow, shimmering clouds. I was running low on fuel, so I pulled into a rundown station near Melville, one of those places that look half abandoned until you notice a single light on and a guy smoking near the pumps. I killed the engine and stepped down from the cab. Crickets screamed all around, and the air had a strange sweetness, like something rotting just out of sight. I was sliding my cart into the pump when the guy by the door coughed and nodded. He was wiry, in a torn denim jacket, and I remember his eyes were milky white, as if cataracts had turned them to smoke. He smiled with one corner of his mouth. Keep your hands clean when you pump. Folks spill more than fuel round here. Then he disappeared inside. I shrugged it off, filled the tank, and climbed back into my rig. That's when I saw it, something hanging from my outside door handle. It was a tiny burlap pouch, maybe the size of a thumb, tied with red thread and smeared with what looked like black wax. When I leaned closer, I saw little chicken bones threaded through the string, and something dark and wetted seeped into the fabric. I'd seen pictures of things like that on roadside shrines down south, gree-gree bags they're called. Folk charms or curses, depending who made them. At first, I figured a kid left it there as some tourist prank. But when I reached for it, a voice in my head, clear and cold, said, "Don't touch that." I looked around the lot, but it was empty. Even the man in denim was gone. The air had changed. No crickets, no breeze, just a thick buzzing hum low in my ears. My scalp tingled, and for a second I thought a mosquito had landed on me. But when I slapped my neck, the sound multiplied. The buzzing was inside the cab now. At first it was faint, like an engine vibration. Then it grew louder and sharper, until it filled every inch of space around me. I turned on the cab light and saw nothing, no flies, no insects, nothing visible at all. Still, the sound crawled under my skin. I slammed the door shut and started the truck, but the noise stayed. I could almost feel the air moving against my face, as if something invisible was swarming my cheeks, creeping into my hair. About 15 miles down the highway, I caught movement in the headlights. My steering wheel looked alive. My eyes blurred and refocused, and the rubber grip seemed to pulse under my fingers like breathing flesh. I looked down, and the floor mat was wriggling too. That's when I realized what I was seeing: snakes. Small, black snakes, hundreds of them, their bodies sliding between my boots, their tongues flicking at my pant leg. I screamed and jammed on the brakes. The truck fishtailed, lights flaring off the trees before I managed to pull it onto the grassy shoulder. The cab filled with that sweet, honey rot smell again. Everything shimmered, the road warping like a heat mirage. My skin itched, my vision swam. It felt like my bones were humming. I opened the door and jumped out into the dark. The night air hit me like a wet rag, warm, heavy, full of noise. I staggered down an embankment and found myself at the edge of a swamp, cypress trees standing like giants in knee-deep black water. The fog was thick here, glowing faint orange under my taillights. The chorus of frogs and insects rose and fell until it blurred into one solid note of sound. I turned to look at my truck, but through the mist, the headlights looked wrong, too dim, like they were shining through smoke. The shadows between the cypress knees began to move, rippling shapes that didn't belong there. I could still hear the invisible insects swarming in my ears, whispering like soft static, except now the buzzing had rhythm, syllables almost forming into murmurs. The voice came from behind me. I spun around, nearly slipping in the mud. The man from the gas station was standing in the shallows, pant legs soaked, that torn denim jacket now clinging wet to his skin. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, milky as river stones. His hand rose, curling around something unseen. The hum in my bones peaked, a high-pitched sting that made my teeth ache. Behind him, the shadows gathered into a wall of movement, figures crawling and swaying, as if made of the same mist that covered the swamp. My legs buckled. I hit the ground hard and felt water soak my jeans. The shapes moved closer, each one whispering in a language I couldn't place. The buzzing in my head turned into 1,000 tiny wings fluttering behind my eyes. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. No sound. No smell. No hallucinations. The insects were gone. The swamp was silent. When I looked back at my truck, the lights were normal. The steering wheel was just rubber. And on the passenger seat sat the gree-gree bag, perfectly dry, tied with a fresh knot. I don't remember driving out of there. Somehow, I ended up parked at a truck stop just outside Kinder. The early sun was coming up, turning the sky copper. My hands were shaking, and my clothes smelled like swamp water. I took that bag, still cold in my palm, and walked it to the nearest patch of grass. I dug a small hole with a tire iron, dropped the thing in, and covered it with dirt. Then I poured out half my thermos of coffee over it. An old superstition from another driver came back to me. Never keep something found hanging on your rig. It isn't a gift. I still take that route sometimes because it's shorter, but I never stop in Melville anymore. The fishy sweet smell comes back sometimes though, even with the windows rolled up. And on nights when I park too close to the cypress line, I swear I can hear that same faint buzzing, the one that sounds like it's inside my head waiting. The strange part? Since that night, not one insect has ever landed on me. Not a mosquito, not a fly. Nothing. Sometimes silence bites harder than the noise. It was late November, just a whisper from midnight, and my rig was loaded for a straight haul across the Rella stretch, winding, steep, and notorious among long-haul truckers for being a place where headlights go to die in fog and cold. That night was colder than usual. Frost feathered the mirrors even before moonrise, and every bump of the grade seemed to echo in my ribs. There's a certain comfort in routine, familiar gauges, hum of the radio, the promise of coffee in the next town. But horror, I've learned, is the subtle theft of that comfort. Nearing the bottom, my cabin filled with an unnatural chill, like someone left a freezer door open inside me. Visibility dropped to a few dozen feet, and the road itself grew slick with anticipation. It was then that I saw it, or rather, him, a small, transparent figure with a red ball, right inside my lane. I swerved as instinct kicked in, tires shrieking as the truck hadn't screamed since the Tennessee ice storm. No thud, no impact. If there'd been a child on that road, he should have been gone, a regret, a statistic, a headline for morning news. But there was no sound except my pulse stuttering in my ears, and the figure faded before my brights. I stopped the rig, leaning hard against the wheel, desperately scanning for any sign, debris, a dropped toy, skid marks. There was nothing except my heavy breath fogging up the window. When I resumed driving, the cabin felt wrong. I couldn't shake the image of the child, so vivid, his breath crystallizing around that ball, his eyes glassy, ancient. It was then I noticed the frost on the inside of the windshield, finger marks, smudged at first, then clearer. Small handprints, printed slick and impossibly cold on the inner glass. Each print aimed toward the far side of the road, always veering me away from the town just up ahead, Fairhill, off the Rella bypass. Fairhill was a dirt town, half-eaten by forest and night. Rumor was, folks there used to mine silver until the ground turned sour, swallowing their joy and children alike. I'd passed it 100 times, never stopping longer than a minute for gas. But driven by the persistent, urgent handprints now crowding every inch of my windshield, I couldn't help but watch for the town's sign as I came close. The hands seemed to multiply, overlapping, smearing with frost so thick it felt like something living pressed against the glass. My own breath turned visible as the heater choked. Chatter from the CB faded to static. Every hand pointed me away from Fairhill's exit, as if pleading. Then, the headlights caught another shimmer, just off the shoulder, near an old gas pump, the same red ball flashing like arterial blood under the halogen glow. No child, only the toy, spinning slowly in the wind. I tried to ignore it, forging ahead, but as the exit loomed, my GPS glitched and flickered. Make a U-turn at Fairhill Road. My headlights flickered, every radio station died, and the world outside my cab seemed to knit together with cold and fear. Reluctantly, I pulled off slow, rolling through a town that felt as if the sun hadn't risen for years. Fairhill at night is all closed doors and shuttered windows. Streetlights flicker like the last stars in a dying sky. I idled by the park, rubber ball now spinning at the bottom of the old slide, and those handprints on the window vanished, one by one. The cab's temperature rose slightly, but the cold never truly left. I exited my vehicle, compelled by something older than fear. Curiosity, guilt, dread. The streets were empty, utter silence except for my own boots crunching ice, and yet I heard children's laughter, distant and echoing. Shadows moved behind the swing set, never stepping out of the gloom. Suddenly, behind me, a bone-deep chill wrapped my spine, and I saw, in the window of the old diner, a flood of tiny hands pressed to the glass, as if a classroom of children were trapped or playing a desperate game of tag with something invisible. Legend among truckers says Fairhill is haunted by the children who vanished in the mine's collapse 50 winters back. Their handprints supposedly appear to those who tempt fate or drive alone too late at night. Some say their spirits try to warn travelers, desperate to keep newcomers from suffering the same fate. In my story, those prints drove me from that town, made me skip my planned stop, made me push on until dawn with white knuckles on the wheel. Every turn thereafter, every damning whisper from the radio, every red ball left on the roadside felt personal, like those children remembered me. When I reached the next town, alive, shaken, and different, I learned of another trucker that didn't heed the warning that same night. His rig was found wrecked just beyond Fairhill, windshield spider-cracked, inside dusted with frost and handprints impossibly small. Years have passed, but every November as I descend the Rella grade, I check my mirrors for frost. The handprints haven't returned, but sometimes in the reflection of my dashboard, I see a tiny palm pressed against the glass, pointing away from Fairhill, always urging don't stop. Don't look back. That road that night made me believe in warnings and ghosts, and now, with every winter drive, I believe a little more. If you've ever hauled freight through Montana in the dead of winter, you know Highway 2 is a lonely stretch. It's the kind where the snow falls so thick, the world vanishes past your headlights. Back in January, I was pushing through one of those classic Rocky Mountain blizzards, the kind that erases every landmark, every sign of life, turning the road into a tunnel of white. My midnight log was running behind, and I'd been awake far too long, but the whiteout meant stopping wasn't much safer than pushing on. I passed the mile marker just east of Havre, Montana. The wind was howling, drifting snow over the blacktop, and the CB was dead silent. I had one eye on the mirrors for deer or stalled cars, the other on the dash, counting every minute to Shelby and the next coffee stop. That's when my headlights caught something. At first, just a shape, a woman standing by the side, framed in swirling snow, white dress flapping like a banner. It didn't make sense. You don't see pedestrians out there, not at midnight, not like that, not dressed as if she'd stepped out of another century. I eased off the throttle, slowed down to avoid blinding her with light, and pulled onto the shoulder. My wipers fought the ice. As she stepped closer, I saw her dress was vintage, lace at the sleeves, satin yellowed by time. Her hair and skin were ghostly pale under my dome light. But it was her eyes, cold blue, fixed and unblinking. I rolled down the passenger window and asked if she needed help. She didn't even flinch at the cold. You lost? I tried again, my voice lost in the wind. She didn't speak, just moved like she'd heard me 100 miles off. I got out and let her into the cab. She sat quietly, hands folded, gaze locked on the windshield. I figured maybe a wedding party gone wrong, maybe someone broke down and got stranded out here. Her dress was spotless, dry, even as my boots soaked through from snow. But the air felt colder than it should. Her breath fogged up the glass in stark, icy lines. I offered her a coffee from my thermos, thinking maybe she'd relax, but her silence stretched. The only sound was my engine idling and the distant roar of the blizzard. She never looked at me, didn't shiver, didn't warm. After a few miles, I tried small talk, asked if she had anyone I could call. No answer. Eventually, I reached for my phone to check signal. The last call was to my old dispatcher, Jimmy, who, truth be told, had died last November. A heart attack had taken him on a run near Butte. The grief was still raw, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the call. Paranormal stories aren't rare among truckers, but skepticism runs deep on the highway. That's when she finally spoke, voice like frost on glass. "Jimmy isn't waiting for your call." My throat tightened. The words cut through me. She said his name, the name only I knew sat at the top of my call log, and her tone was flat, devoid of warmth. I stared, unable to muster a reply. How could she know? I hadn't mentioned him. My radio hissed. She turned her head, staring at me now with eyes even more glacial than the storm outside. Something about her expression suggested both accusation and sorrow, layered under that chilly calm. I wanted to step on the brakes, pull over, leave her at the next rest stop, anything to get away. She blinked once, then faded away, her form flickering like a mirage. One moment she was there, the next just empty space. The seat was cold to the touch, flecks of frost on the dashboard. I felt my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I slammed on the brakes, almost skidding on the ice, and got out, searching behind the cab with a flashlight, calling her name, trying to convince myself I hadn't hallucinated. But my breath froze in the air, crystallizing against the glass. There was no sign of footprints, no hint anyone had exited. Only her lingering, icy breath remained, etched in a ghostly outline on my windshield. When I finally limped into Shelby, I checked for security camera footage. No woman, no passenger. The attendant offered to call the police, but what would I say? I drove further into the night, unable to shake the chill, replaying her words each time the wind rattled the mirrors. I still drive Highway 2 every winter, and every time the blizzard blinds me, I look for that flash of white on the shoulder. Truckers trade these stories at diners and gas stations, and some say it's the spirits of victims lost to the road, hitchhikers who never made it home. Maybe. But nothing prepares you for the ones who know your secrets, who leave only frost and silence behind. So if you're ever out there on the empty Montana road in a midnight snowstorm and a silent woman flags you down, check your last call, and remember, sometimes the dead answer back. Nevada nights always have a hunger to them, dry, wide, and waiting to swallow a man's mind if he stays too long behind the wheel. I've been driving rigs for 23 years, and nothing should faze me after all I've seen. Dust devils rising high as buildings, UFO kooks out by Rachel, ghost lights on the Utah line. But I'll tell you something straight. What I saw that night just past Alamo wasn't any desert mirage. It was alive, and it wanted me to stop. I was heading south on Highway 93, hauling a reefer full of beef bound for Phoenix. Around 2 a.m, traffic thinned until it was just me, the hum of diesel, and a smear of starlight baking across the sand. The CB was dead silent, no chatter, no fuzz from nearby rigs. I liked it that way. When you're that deep into nowhere, silence rides shotgun. Flickers of sagebrush kept sliding through the headlights, and that ribbon of asphalt cut straight through dark mesas like someone split the world in half. 50 miles out of Alamo, I saw it. At first, I thought it was a dog, maybe a coyote straying too close to the shoulder. Then it bolted across the road. Christ, the speed of it! The thing moved like liquid shadow, low and wrong, its limbs hitting the pavement without rhythm. Its eyes, reflective, not red or yellow but white, snapped in the headlights as it blurred past. My stomach dropped. For that half second, I swear I saw it stand upright before vanishing into the scrub. I've seen plenty of wildlife that'll spook a man, elk, stray mustangs, the kind that can wreck a rig if you're not alert. But this moved faster than any coyote should. Too smooth. Too deliberate. I slowed down to 80, hand hovering above the CB mic. For a second, I thought about calling it in. But who's going to believe a trucker at 2 a.m. in the middle of desert nowhere claiming an Olympic sprinter coyote just scoped his grill? The dash clock blinked 2:17. That's when the CB hissed to life. A burst of static cracked through the quiet, then a voice. Babe, can you hear me? My wife's voice. Clear as daylight. Now, my wife was nearly 700 miles away in Ely, where we lived off the old loneliest road. She doesn't have a CB. Never has. But there it was, her voice trembling through channel 19. Please, it said again, breath hitching. Jack, it's following me. I froze. The words crawled through the cab like smoke. The phrasing, the panic, it was her. That gentle crack in her voice she gets when she's scared. I could hear the sound of wind buffeting through her side, that exact same rhythm of breathing when she's crying. "Lisa?" I said into the mic. "Where are you calling from?" Static. Then, faintly sobbing. "Jack, don't stop. Please don't stop." And then it went dead. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached. My brain scrambled to rationalize. Maybe someone pranked me on an open channel. Maybe another trucker used a soundboard. But how could anyone know my name? Or hers? 2 white beams bloomed through the dusty dark. The unmistakable glare of a truck barreling fast behind me. Its engine echoed with a strange uneven growl, like it wasn't running on diesel at all, but on something organic. I flashed my hazards. Nothing. The beams grew closer, the light almost too bright to stare into. Whoever it was, they were riding my tail tight enough to tag my trailer. "Breaker 19. I barked into the mic, pulse slamming in my throat. "Who's back there? You got a problem?" No response. Just static breathing through the line. Then, in between bursts of interference, the voice came again. My wife's voice. "Pull over, Jack. Please. I'm right behind you." Something primal in me wanted to stop. To turn around, to make sure she was okay. But reason clawed through. No. She was home. This was a trick. A good one. Or worse, something pretending to be her. The lights behind me flared, then dimmed, like the driver was flashing his brights. Once. Twice. 3 times. I slowed to 60. The truck matched. I sped to 90. It followed perfectly, too perfectly. I switched off my high beams to check the silhouette. That's when I realized I couldn't make out a cab. There was no front end, no chrome gleam, no distinct shape, just 2 white lights that hovered too high and wide apart for any normal rig. I gritted my teeth, scanning the mirrors. Nothing but empty asphalt trailing back into the desert maw. Then the CB popped again. Soft breathing. "Jack!" The way she said my name broke something in me. That intimate hush, that familiar lilt. Except it was off by half a beat, like someone rehearsed her voice but didn't quite get the rhythm right. "Pull over. I need help. My legs hurt." I killed the CB. Didn't matter. The sound didn't stop. It was coming from inside the cab speakers now, not the radio. Textbook interference doesn't jump systems. That's when I noticed the smell, wet fur and copper, seeping through the vents. Ahead, the road cut between 2 black ridges. No other headlights for miles. Then, in that thin slash of moonlight, something moved on the highway shoulder again. Its front limbs hung longer than they should, reaching its knees. The head tilted as my rig roared past, and I caught a glimpse of its teeth. Too many for a coyote. I slammed the gas, clutching the wheel till my hands cramped. But no matter how far I drove, the lights appeared again, matching my speed, flashing in rhythm. The smell grew stronger. At 3:04 a.m., something thudded against the side of the trailer. Once, then again. It wasn't debris. Each hit had timing, like fists pounding metal to get attention. My CB flickered to life one last time. "Jack, it's here with me," Lisa's voice said, trembling and faint. "It's in the cab." She screamed, and through the static, I heard my own voice respond from somewhere far away, a perfect echo, repeating words I hadn't spoken yet. Then the road ahead flooded in white. Just before the world disappeared in glare, I saw what was behind me, caught only for a heartbeat in the mirror. A truck, but not a truck. The outline shimmered, wrong and soft around the edges, like flesh trying to imitate metal. Its lights twisted and blinked like blinking eyes rather than headlights. And through that searing glow, a mouth. A vertical slit beneath the grille, opening. Waiting. I blacked out near the state line. Troopers found me 3 hours later parked crooked on the shoulder, engine still running, CB crackling softly. No other vehicles for 50 miles in either direction. And when they checked the trailer, they said the steel was dented from the inside, huge curved marks like kneecaps pressed into aluminum. Lisa never made a call that night. Phone logs showed nothing. But sometimes, half asleep in a truck stop near Tucson, the radio keys up on its own, soft breathing hissing through the feed. Then her voice. "Jack! It's still out there.